you very much for the presentation. And I move to textile. I please remind the panelists to stick as much as possible to their time limit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Can you see me? Well, I will share my screen in any case.
Not for the moment.
Cannot see you, but
yeah. Yes, perfect. Thanks.
Okay, good. Let me put this on. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Julia. Nice to hear you and nice to see many of my former colleagues from the Chamber Network. As some of you know, this is a bit of a special event for me personally, because until 1 year ago, I used to work for Eurochambers, and I've, as part of my responsibilities, was actually to develop our cooperation with the Eastern Partnership countries, starting with East Invest 1, East Invest 2, and initiating this new program. So I'm happy that these efforts continue, and that even when I left 1 year ago, Eurochambers has continued to invest in this relationship with our 6 Eastern neighborhood countries. As of today, as you can see on the slide, I work for Eurotex as a Director General. So I represent the European textile industry. And I'm very happy, together with my colleague Corina Moya, to share some, let's say, insight into the, let's say, key characteristics of the textile industry. Briefly, maybe also on the impact of the Corona crisis, make some recommendations, and of course, as the previous speakers have done, try to share or try to go a little bit more detailed into the situation in each of the 6 countries. I know we are short of time, so I think, Julia, all participants will have access to the sectoral reports which have been drafted already. And
yes, indeed.
So many of the things that we say, and that I think also the other colleagues, experts have said, will be available in more detail in these reports. So let's try to do it relatively quick here. So a few again general characteristics which are important for participants if they want to develop, I would say, a meaningful activity in the textile industry. First, just to emphasize that when you talk about textiles, that covers a very, very wide range of products, of subsectors, if you want. So textiles is not what you wear. It also includes what you wear, but it's much more than that. Certainly in Europe, there has been a very important growth in what we call technical textiles. So things that you may not consider textiles, but in the car industry, when building trains, airplanes, windmills, in the agricultural sector. So textiles is more than clothing. It actually has a very wide range of application and very different business models. So when you develop an activity, you need to be very clear what kind of textiles that you're focusing on. Typical for textiles is as well that you have a very high level of specialization across the different steps in the production process, from the fiber production into the yarns, into the fabrics. So you see very limited vertical integration and instead a high level of specialization across those different production steps. So again, you need to bear that in mind when developing your activities. Needless to emphasize that, well, I think it is important that this sector, as many other sectors, is very SME driven, both in the EU and in the Eastern Partnership countries. So be careful again when thinking of textiles. Some of you may have in mind some of the big brands, H&M, Inditex, whatever, not to name them. they are not textiles industry. They are retail industry, a client of the textile industry. So that's very important to bear that in mind. The textile producers, the textile industry in Europe is essentially a small, medium-sized business. It's obviously a very globalized industry, a very competitive industry. And I just put a few numbers on the screen to give you a flavor, with China and many other Asian countries very dominant, very present, also on the European market. And again, that leads to high levels of specialization based on technical value added, based on innovation, based on sustainability. There is a strong competition. At the same time, there's a lot of movement in the industry where, again, the 6 Eastern Partnership countries may play a role, but it's very important to identify within that very globalized industry which niche, which specific subsector, sub-products they may have a competitive advantage. When you look specifically at trade relations between the EU and the Eastern Partnership countries, trade is relatively low. Ukraine has is maybe more important, but with the other countries, trade flows, both export and import, are, I would say, too small. And we all know the DCFTAs that are in place. I would say there is certainly scope for increasing the trade intensity between the EU and the Eastern Partnership countries. If you look at the slide on the right, which is the blue part, is the share of export from each of the 6 countries going into the EU. And you can see, for example, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, very, very low share of their exports going into the EU. So that means there is a lot of potential to intensify trade relations. When talking about textiles, obviously sustainability comes on top of the list of challenges. I think all of you know that textiles are very much in the spotlight when we discuss the EU Green Deal, when we discuss circularity. So there again, there is a lot of things happening, and there's no time this morning to go into any detail, but there is plenty of legislation, regulations, strategies being implemented at European level, which will have an impact also on the way textile companies in the Eastern Partnership region will operate. And again, no time to go into details, but sustainability and circularity are critical for the long-term competitiveness of the textile business in Europe. So what we certainly do as Eurotex, as European textile business, is to try to embrace sustainability as a source of competition, as a source of competitiveness vis-a-vis, for example, Asian, Chinese producers. So this is a factor in any activity to be developed in the program. This sustainability factor should be considered. Very quickly, impact of the Corona crisis. Not going to any detail, but just to emphasize that the textile industry has suffered badly, is suffering badly, with minus 50 billion euro of turnover for 2020. So we're talking about minus 30% in business developed this year. And this will continue in the next, at least the next 6 to 12 months. On this slide, you can see a comparison between different sectors of the European economy, and you can see textile, apart from tourism, which is, I would say, even worse, if I can put it in those terms. But so the level of pessimism within the textile industry is quite bad. And of course, this has to do with the lockdown. This has to do with problems of supply chains, many reasons for that. But here again, I think this is something that you should consider because also companies in the Eastern Partnership region in the textile industry definitely are going through very difficult times. So that was a quick, let's say, very generic presentation of the let's say the key features. And now I'll pass it on to Corina for making a more detailed analysis in each of the 6 countries. Corina, I hope you are there.
Thank you, Dirk. Yes, I'm going to present you a separate SWOT analysis we have performed for each country. I'm going to go very quickly because there's a lot of information that you can find in the slides. And let's start with Armenia. As strengths, we can underline that the textile is one of the 11 strategic export-oriented countries, well-established sector in this country, and one of the most important sources of employment. The textile, apparel, leather, and shoes industries are among the oldest and fastest growing industries in the Armenia economy. That means that the country has a lot of experience in this sector. As weaknesses, we can underline that the textile products produced are not competitive in the regional and international markets. The country also lacks a tradition of in entrepreneurship, and it needs, of course, training in this field. And the textile product range is mainly composed by commodities, and no technical products are envisaged. And also there is complicated bureaucratic procedures and administrative barriers that hampers the exports and the commercial trade. And also to underline that the standards and certificates are not mutually recognized in the EU and Eurasian Union systems. But there is opportunities because Armenia government is considering as a priority the revival of the sector and is introducing new incentives in this sector. Also, Armenian textile companies act as subcontractors for the well-known companies, and Armenia is located in a privileged position near the EU, which facilitates the commercial transactions, and it's an attractive platform for investors. Investors coming from EU or EA can establish textile companies and export with no custom duties, which is very attractive. As threats, so we have the unpredictable business development with frequent changes in government and legislation, volatile exchange rates. Also, the international rates are dominated by large conglomerates supported by the state. And the subcontracting model we mentioned before can be dangerous for the Armenian companies because it supposes dependency of the customers. Next, please. For Ukraine, Ukraine is the top 10 world exporter of plain woven fabrics, wool coverings, flax, wool, and true hemp, which is a very competitive advantage for the country. And also, it used to be one of the largest centers of textile industry in the former Soviet Union, so it has textile tradition. With very highly educated people, the domestic market is experimenting continuously growing. And also there's a positive trend with some international brands establishing production in the country. The country has competitive wages and a good location, which facilitates transport. Transport costs and transit times could be optimized, but are very good. The increase in the creation of local fashion brands fostered by the fashion weeks and the design universities in the country. And the textile and clothing sector are one of the main industrial sectors in the country. But there is a lack of workers trained in soft export skill, which could be fostered. And the textile facilities need modernization. There is a fragmented value chain because there is there is a production of fabrics and flax and wool fibers, but there is no, the textile industry is focused mainly on apparel, no hardly spinning, weaving, dyeing. Also, the country has complicated bureaucratic procedures and administrative barriers that hamper investments. The labeling, packaging, and logistics costs are expensive. The standards and certifications are not mutually recognized. But as opportunities, we have that the EU and Ukraine signed a free trade agreement in 2017. Ukraine location near Russia and EU facilitates the commercial transactions. There is a well-prepared workforce for sourcing, ready to wear apparel. And also the Ukrainian government has taken up plans for attracting investment, focused on the development of the domestic technical textiles and non-wovens industry, which is a very good news. The Ukrainian exports are growing. And there are different regional and bilateral free trade agreements and agreements with the EU that could be taken into account. As threats, we can underline that the unpredictable business development with frequent changes in government, legislation, volatile exchange rates. Also that Ukraine doesn't produce raw fiber materials, which makes the country vulnerable and dependent. And I think these are the main features. So we can pass to the next country, which is Moldova. Moldova have moderate investment needs. It is a professional training system for employees already in place. The high-end brands like, for instance, Moncler manufacture their products in Moldova. There is a strong and competent labor force capable to work with new technologies. The sector can offer fast deliveries to neighboring countries. Also, there is a long-standing tradition for exporting. Moldova production meets high quality standards and offers commercial and fiscal incentives. As weaknesses, we can point out that most of the Moldovan apparel lack of workers trained in soft and export skills. Most of the Moldovan apparel producing companies work on kata manufacturing or car manufacturing trip models. Most of the export traded to the EU are clothing items, resulting in this manufacturing configuration I mentioned before. So as opportunities, we could see that the country has the opportunity to shift by this hunting manufacturing model towards the development of a higher value-added production. The implementation of clusters covering the end-to-end value chain from spinning, weaving, knitting, dyeing, finishing to confection, fully established in Moldova to deliver on the full package sourcing. Moldovan textile industry needs to shift from this subcontract model to the development of production of own brands. As threats, we have the share of exports of Moldovan textile industry facing a declining trend over the last year, and this potential commodity and raw material shortages may occur due to the constrained competition driven by the lockdown. Next please. Let's go with Georgia. Georgia has succeeded in fulfilling the market demand for continuous growth in the high qualified labor force. Also, the textile industry in this country is capable to deliver high quality products to renowned brands. It has become an export base for neighboring countries to access the EU market of the Commonwealth of Independent States and the United States of America. The country offers a broad range of production possibilities, brand development and technical textile. And as witnesses, we can point out the apparel production with limited value added. Most of the exports traded to the EU are clothing items resulting from a cut manufacturing tree configuration. There is low innovation potential. And as opportunities, also the same as Moldova, Georgia has the opportunity to shift from this cut manufacturing model towards high value added production. Also, there is an opportunity of implementation of clusters covering the end-to-end value chain. And also the same, Georgia has the opportunity to shift from a subcontracting model to the production of own brands. There is also a stretch substantial slowdown in this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the difficulties to promote Georgian products in the EU. Next, Dirk. Belarus, as a strength, has made a steady progress in improving their business environment. And there is a clear priorities for this sector set up in the SME strategy 2013. There is a public-private dialogue strengthened by the government. And as weaknesses, we have that Belarus has one of the lowest numbers of SMEs per capita across the eastern countries. The state-owned companies continue to play a disproportionate role in the economy. There is a difficulty access to finance for the SMEs. There is an inadequate educated workforce in SMEs. But as opportunities, we have that the business environment is improving lately. Household consumption is increasing. The investments in fixed assets increased also as a result of growing external and internal demand. And also the government of Belarus has been increasing its efforts to promote private sector development and strengthen the position of SMEs. As threats, we have the economic growth deceleration, the political instability, and as in the other countries, the COVID-19. Next. Yes, we have for the last countries, Azerbaijan, that has made a steady progress also in improving their business environment, putting in place the main building blocks of a proactive SME policy and immobilizing the necessary human and financial resources to support it. There is a dedicated SME business development agency established in 2017 with a milestone in shaping the SME support infrastructure and also the support to SMEs internationalization. As weaknesses, we have the SMEs generation of value-added and employment ratios in 2018 were lower than the average reported by OECD. Also, in the last year, the growth in exports of goods towards the EU decreased of 6%. There is a difficulty when accessing international markets. As an opportunities, we can underline the EU supports the government of Azerbaijan in the development of more coherent policy towards SMEs, allowing the country to unleash the potential of SMEs for long-term socioeconomic development. The threats we have as common the outbreak of the COVID-19 that could have a significant economic impact, particularly on SMEs, and it is expected a contraction in domestic output, household spending, and international trade.
Good. Thank you, Corina. Then just to wrap up very quickly, we try to summarize our recommendations, both from a policy perspective and from a more operational perspective. I will not go through each of them individually, but I think when you heard Corina going to the 6 countries, you see some of the things coming back. Emphasis on innovation, focus on reorganizing the labor market, the importance of the SME development in the industry, strengthening the connection with Europe, the ecosystem, the public-private dialogue. So there's a lot that can be done to improve the policy framework for the textile industry. And that very much linked to that, there are a number of operational measures or measures at the level of companies that can be taken, linked to technical training, linked to improve the export performance, the branding, the industry transformation, so reorganizing the product range. So again, all of these elements, all of these recommendations are explained in more detail in the sector report that will be available to all the participants. I would like to just conclude again from that very holistic perspective. Given the current situation with the Corona crisis, there is a lot happening in the textile industry. In the long term, this can be to the benefit of the companies in the Eastern Partnership countries. There is a trend to reshore, to bring production closer to Europe. There is a trend to focus more on innovation and sustainability, where Eastern Partnership companies can play a role. There is a trend towards strengthening an industrial production base in Europe, and that's again where companies from the 6 Eastern Partnership countries can benefit from. So in short, there are some challenges, that's clear, for reform, for restructuring, but in the medium and longer term, I would like to emphasize that there are certainly good prospects for the textile industry in the Eastern Partnership region. Thank you.